Okay, let's get Callan in here to kick us off. Afternoon, gents. Hey, Lee, are you surprised by how many players in the NHL have jumped ship to play in Europe or in the KHL?
This must be from the old Canada Network line out of Western Canada. Callum, they pay a lot of money. To me, and I've asked this question of NHL people and actually San Diego Goal people, why would a player go play there? Just because of the uncertainty of how they treat Americans. But the hockey players are paid tremendously well to go to the KHL. The level of competition is nowhere near the National Hockey League. A lot of these guys are journeyman guys. There's not a lot of stars that go to play there. Our relationship between the NHL and the KHL is really, really rocky. That's had to do a lot with politics and obviously the mess in Ukraine with Putin. But they evidently feel very safe over there. And it's a monster big league. Obviously, CSK Moscow, Moscow Dynamo, St. Petersburg, they're all some of the best franchises there. There's one in Finland that's part of that league. There's one in China that's part of that league. Young guys come out of there and get drafted by the NHL, and then older veterans from here go back there. I'd find it really uncomfortable to live in Russia at this point in time when they're arresting Americans and all that. But the players evidently, it must be a safe haven for them because there have been a fair number of guys that have signed with the different clubs in the KHL.
Well, after the whole Brittany Griner mess,
Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't want to go to Russia to play. I mean, you don't know what the hell could happen.
The elite leagues are in Finland, in Sweden. The Swiss NHL has gotten much better, and they've lured veteran players there, and they've developed some young players that have come here. That have played. There's second tier leagues in Germany. There's one in Italy, but you're on the periphery of the National Hockey League, and maybe you're towards the end of your career and say, well, I'll go have the international experience and payday. So there are alternatives. However, there's also an import ratio. Sweden and Finland and Switzerland, you can only have 3, quote, imports. Either that's Team USA members or Canadians. So there's only 3 per team.
That sounds like the quotas in the Japanese baseball league.
Sure.
I think, but there's a young man here in Poway that is playing hockey in England for, I think it's the Milton Keynes team, which is weird. It's an economist, but that's the name of the team. And he's had a really good run there. So I'm assuming that's like a minor league version.
That's probably an A or a AA version.
Yeah.
But I mean, Finland, Sweden are really the elite European leagues, and Switzerland has now really developed. The leading scorer of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews, when he had 60-plus goals this season, he left. He's from Scottsdale, Arizona. And he went and he played for the Zurich Lions as an 18-year-old. He wasn't eligible for the draft in the NHL yet. So he went there and played very, very well. He was coached by an NHL coach at that point in time. And then he had a very good season. And again, it's not the grind of a season that the NHL is. I think they play maybe 50 to 60 games max there. But he played, got a lot of experience, and obviously was a first-round draft pick of the Maple Leafs and has gone on to be a superstar. So international hockey is really kind of cool, but it's not the National Hockey League. Okay, next question.
Moving on. Okay, let's go here to Chris. He says, from Carlsbad to the Canadian Rockies, Shohei, your lightning bolts. That home run by Ohtani yesterday was the most mammoth shot I've ever seen in my 48 years. Over all the bleachers and under the roof. Now pull the bleeping trigger and acquire an ace and another outfield bat.
Well, I think they're going to make a deal. Even though Kershaw and Glasnow have now been activated and are going to pitch, I think, Wednesday, Thursday against San Francisco. They're talking to Detroit. If I'm a Tiger fan, I think I'd be terminally pissed. Why are you trading the ace of my staff when you're trying to build this franchise? But they're talking about trading for Tarek Skubal, who's I think he's 13-4, 13-5, big strikeout guy. But evidently they don't think they can re-sign him. So, and the Ohtani home run. I mean, he launched that sucker into right center field, and that thing just kept going up and up, and it went over the first section in the right field stands, went over the second section, and it hit. I think there's all kinds of Japanese signage boards now because we talked about Ohtani and how the Dodgers are marketing him to corporate Japan. It either hit the Japanese sign above the fans in right center, or it went underneath. But if the sign had not been there, sucker would have gone out of Dodger Stadium. I don't know if anybody's ever hit a home run at a Dodger Stadium. Ohtani is just crushing it.
Well, didn't Tatis hit one out? I mean, it was like 467 feet a few
Could
years
be.
ago. Yeah, but I like the in the outfield in Dodger Stadium. They have kind of like a overhang that has like a VW
Yeah.
kind of a look to it, like a carport or something. But imagine launching a ball over that.
473.
Holy crap! I mean,
Now, I think the all-time major league record, and this goes back to when I was a kid, and I think I saw this on TV. Mickey Mantle, I think, hit a 565-foot home run in Washington at the old Griffith Stadium, went over the roof against the Washington Senators, and it was found out in the streets. And I don't know how you measure it, but they said it was 565 feet home run.
Well, I think today they have the technology to get the speed and the launch angle,
Yeah.
and they can project the trajectory, right? And I think that's how they compute the distance. Because how can you compute, the distance if it's in the second deck? It hasn't gone all the way and hit the ground on the other side. But maybe when Mantle did it, maybe that's how they measured it.
Either that, the common joke was actually a 2.5-mile home run because it landed in the backseat of a taxi cab and a guy was delivering somebody there. Okay, thank you for the comment. Go ahead, next question.
Okay, let's talk a little golf here with Jason. He goes, I agree about Daly. His act is blah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, I interviewed him twice and I was just kind of turned off. And it was at that point, he was a young golfer, had won Grand Slam events. And that's why he's still out there in these majors. And he's always at the bottom of the leaderboard. And he either disqualifies himself or he drops out. He's got his sticks, he's got his smokes, he's got his suds. But to me, he's really a bad representative of what the pro golfers of today are all about. And when his exemption runs out, then he'll be playing in your golf course, miniature golf. It's terrible. I feel really bad for Tiger. This should not be happening. It's just a sad sack story to watch him limp, to watch him drag his leg, to see the scores that he's shooting, because he's nowhere near the player physical, and he can't be. He's had 5 different surgeries, and he's always been a great ambassador and an entrepreneur for the game, despite all the mess he got himself involved in with his personal life. But at the end of the day, he could be a great commentator. Take that next step and leave the tour behind, and let us remember the greatness of the guy that won 15 Grand Slams and 85 tournaments, not a guy dragging his leg up the hill who is 14 over par.
Well, why does he go to these events anyways? Does he just feel like he's entitled? Hey, I'm automatic qualifier. Screw you. I'm going to play.
Yeah. For some reason, he holds hope that he's going to be able to find it. But if you can't practice a lot just because of the back and the legs, then how can you play on this tour against Xander?
Well, I will say this with John Daly, when he first appeared on the scene, it was really entertaining and it was fun. But, Jason's right. It's a bad act now because he went down deep into that rabbit hole of being that guy. And now he's sponsored by, what is it, Loudmouth, I think, with these outrageous outfits on the golf course. So he has become a cartoon character.
Exactly. It violates the dress code. It just makes no sense at all. Next question.
Okay, let's go here down the list. Callan had another comment here I want to get in. Dodgers DFA James Paxton. Seems like a good ad for the Friars. We'll see what AJ does, I suppose.
Well, Paxton's got what? He had 8 or 9 wins, and he's played pretty well. Now, maybe he's DFA'd because he's hurt. He's got a history of a lot of injuries. So I'll be intrigued to see that maybe he winds up on the disabled list. But he's been hurt a lot, but yet he competes, he scraps. And like I say, I think he's either got 8 or last night he pitched against the Red Sox and hung in there for a while. But maybe he winds up on somebody's disabled list.
Yeah, he's always been kind of a broken down guy. You know?
Seattle, Boston. And yet there were flashes. He pitched pretty well. At one point, he was 5-0 out of the gate with the Dodgers, but he was giving up walks and had men on base all the time.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Paxton, I'm surprised that the Dodgers signed him in the first place. Let's go back down here. Derek had a comment about the Bears. He goes, the Bears better hope Williams is as diligent with the playbook as he is with figuring out his contract.
Yeah. The entrepreneur, I was kind of stunned. And, I kept getting bits and fragments of what these lawyers were proposing. And I said, this isn't right. nobody's ever done this before. Of course, now we talk about Ohtani and the deferred payments, etc. But in the NFL came back and said, no, you can't change the collective bargaining agreement. This is the language. You can have incentive bonuses, and your contract is 4 years with a 5th-year option. We're not putting in loans, and we're not putting in all this other creative financing. He's a good player. And I'll tell you, Chicago, I think, and we're going to talk about the NFL a lot more now that camps are rolling. Chicago did a lot to add talent around him. I mean, they got Keenan Allen. That's a big time route runner, and they've got a really good tight end. They're 3 deep at running back, and then they drafted Odunze from the University of Washington. So the Bears offensively are going to be what the Bears haven't been offensively ever since I can ever remember. They were a Super Bowl team, but that was the monster of the Midway's defense, Mike Singletary and Mike Ditka and all that. This is going to be a dynamic offensive team, and I think Williams is a hell of a student of the game. And they're going to build an offense with guys who can run and sprint draw running backs, and then Williams may run the ball some too. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in Chicago.
Well, back in the 80s, they had sweetness, right? They had Peyton there, Jim McMahon. I mean, that offense was all right. I mean, it wasn't,
It was Walter Payton.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It was Payton. He was fantastic. But the Bears have not been anything since 1985, right?
I don't think the Bears ever had a 3,000-yard passing quarterback? I don't think so.
Oh, I doubt it.
No. I mean, as a young kid growing up, their quarterback was Billy Wade. And then their quarterback was a left-handed Bobby Douglas. Good luck with pass completions and that. And then obviously McMahon was a dynamic firebrand leader, but it was still Walter Payton's offense, sandwiched or wrapped around it. Just a phenomenally great, might have been the greatest Super Bowl defense of all time, the Fridge and Singletary and Dave Durson and all those guys. Chicago's just never had any quarterbacks. So now they got a quarterback. It bears watching. I think they're going to be a fun team to follow.
The Bears bear watching.
The Bears. Okay. Next topic.
Okay, let's go to David. Talk a little Olympics. He says, hey, are you going to be covering the Paris Olympics? John Hacksaw, what's your favorite Olympic sport to watch?
I'm a big track and field guy, especially the Summer Olympics. I just love to see the American sprinters. And we've got some great female speed queens, and we got great sprinters. I love the relay teams. So I like track and field. When they had the Olympics here in '84 in LA, I was working in Phoenix at that time. I came over, and I got to see the Brazilian volleyball team. Unbelievable. And I had not really been exposed to much volleyball. I was really impressed. And I got to see some great track and field events at the LA Coliseum and all that. It's so much fun to watch. A time difference is going to make it kind of hard in Paris because a lot of these events will have already been run. So you're not going to see everything live that you'd like to see. But I like that. I'm a huge winter guy. And of course, I came from snow country, so I'd love to see the bobsleds. And obviously, I'd love to see the ski jump. So, I mean, those guys, you talk about courageous coming off the slopes. Wow. So I like the Olympics. I don't like the money in the Olympics. I don't like the politics of the Olympics. And that won't go away. And when the professionals became part of the Olympics, I think it took a little bit of the luster off it. But at the end of the day, the then Soviet Union, those all were Army military members were playing on the Olympic hockey team. That's why 1980 and Herb Brooks and Jim Craig, the goalie, and Mike Eruzione, that's why that was such a great moment in Olympic history, because our college kids beat Tretiak and all the Russian professionals. So, and unfortunately, the Olympics now have been stained by an awful lot of cheating, blood doping, whether it's swimmers, whether it's track and field people, China, Russia, it's a huge issue. And it's also the great debate, because of what Russia has done to Ukraine. Do we take it out on the Russian athletes and ban them? They're not going to wear Russian uniforms. They're going to be an independent federation running by themselves. It's not going to be, quote, that team. So you like the Olympics. What do you like most?
Oh, I love them. I just think it's funny. Hacksaw going out, checking out the Brazilian beach volleyball team. The sprints are always fantastic. when I was a kid, I raced BMX, and that was a big thing, bicycle motocross, and now it's an Olympic sport. I think this is its second year. So for me, that's a personal thrill to see that, especially in skateboarding too. But one thing that I seems like there's so much swimming, it's the freestyle, the breaststroke. I mean, every possible configuration of swimming, I kind of get bored with it. But I don't have a problem with the pros playing. I mean, what's your take on Team USA? They almost lost to South Sudan.
Well, South Sudan has a couple of NBA players there, and they caught them on a bad night. And I don't think Steve Kerr and those guys walked in there with the focus that we got a big game here. And that was their Olympic matchup for the South Sudanese. But they do have athletes, and they've got some NBA guys who are kind of part of that whole mix. Mm-hmm. So I was a little surprised. But I don't know, to have the pros. Playing the NBA championship and raising the trophy is what it's all about. And you're all making mega money. How important is it to get a gold medal? Cool playing for the flag. But, if you're dominating everybody, although they didn't dominate, they got screwed by the Russians way back in the day, the David Thompson era. So I like an awful lot of the Olympic competition, and we never get to see it. I had hoped that U.S. track and field, because of the success we've had with our sprinters, would take off as an entity in the non-Olympic years. And yet the outside of the events in Eugene, Oregon, which is a fabulous facility at the University of Oregon, track and field just seems to be stagnated. It's just not grown. And maybe there's not enough money in there to lure all the great athletes. But we should be better across the board in everything in track and field than we are.
Yeah, and the women sprinters are fantastic.
Oh yeah,
and just the way they look and they're styled and all of the electricity around it, I think is fantastic. Usain Bolt, when did he retire? I mean, it's been out of the Olympics for a few times.
Well, yeah, 8 years ago maybe.
Yeah, and I think Jamaica's probably going to still have some good sprinters.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It
was a big story. I think it was in the New York Times about all of our American distance runners train in Flagstaff now to train in the high altitude.
Hey, that makes sense.
And those guys, the great distance runners globally, they train in South Africa because of distances, because of altitude, et cetera. The Kenyans, I mean, a phenomenal number of great runners. And they all train at altitude, and then America has just kind of caught up to it. This is what we should be doing.
What's that race? The steeplechase where they have to jump over water?
Yeah, hurdles and water, and yeah, exactly.
That's kind of a funky one.
Different. All right, yeah, the Olympics, I think the opening ceremonies are Thursday in Paris, so that'll be an interesting couple of weeks run.
Right on.
Move on.
Let's go to social media here. We got a bunch of guys that want to get involved. And hey, let's talk about the Guardians. And this is from Phil. He says, hey, the Guardians are good. People forget that they were the youngest team in the league 2 years ago and forced the Yanks to play a full 5 in the playoffs. Last year was their sophomore slump season, but they came back this year ready to rock. Good for them.
Yeah, great young pitching. Not a lot of household names, but young, big arms. And they're doing all this without Shane Bieber.
Oh, yeah, Bieber, yeah.
Yeah, he's been on the disabled list all year with season-ending elbow surgery. They really need another bat. I mean, they've got Jose Ramirez, who I think is one of the most underrated players in baseball, and they got the ex-Padre Josh Naylor, and they got his brother Bo Naylor. That's the extent of it. They don't hit a lot of home runs, and they play a lot of 2-1, 1-0, 3-1 games. Maybe they're going to make a deal. What they need is just a veteran rental bat. They need a Justin Turner. They need a J.D. Martinez, because you put another potential power bat in the middle of that batting order. But they're drawn really well. I've been kind of critical of Cleveland ownership for a long time. Again, I worked in Cleveland. I grew up as an Indians fan. I was a Long Island kid that hated the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Giants for some reason. I like Chief Wahoo, the logo. So I grew up as an Indians fan, the Rocky Colavitos and the Herb Scores of the world. But their ownership has turned what I think is a potential great regional franchise into a small franchise because they don't have a big payroll. I went crazy Friday night. I know you were getting dressed to go to the track on Saturday. You didn't see my 6:30 sports package on KUSI. I did a commentary on the Padres losing to Cleveland. I went crazy Friday night because the Padres gave up 6 runs in the 8th inning. The $161 million Padre payroll lost to a Cleveland team. You know what their payroll was Friday night at first pitch? $57 million.
Really?
Yeah. They lost to a 57 million team. Now, Cleveland organizationally is great. A lot of young players, really a bunch of stud young pitchers, and they fought through a lot of injuries along the way just to stay with it. But you lost to a 57 million team. I was just beyond my mind.
Remember the 90s, they were really good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, didn't they make the World Series one of those years? They might have.
Mike Hargrove.
Okay, yeah. And just think of all the great Indians in the past. I mean, you were just mentioning some of them, but they were the team in, I think, in the 54 World Series.
They got beat by the Giants and Willie Mays.
Exactly.
And they won their last championship, I think, was 48. Bill Veeck owned the team, Boston Braves. But so it's been few and far between, but they've always had good players. I think it has a potential to be a phenomenal regional franchise.
Oh, yeah.
But because of low budgets, they turned it into a Cleveland franchise.
Did you like the movie Major Leagues?
It was funny. Yeah, it was kind of weird, but that's okay. It's just, I mean, it was Hollywood creative stuff at its best.
Yeah. I think it's a great movie.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. Let's talk about some Dodgers here. And this is from Rosecrans Robbie. He says, we deal Outman and Lux for value right now. A good reliever, a better injury staff, a washing machine. At this point, just release them and lower parking fees.
Well, they're not going to lower parking fees. I'll grant you that. But they do have resources to make a deal. They got 2 more pitchers at AAA that one could be shopped. They've obviously got Outman, who is hitting pretty good at Oklahoma City. Lux had a horrible start. Now Lux is starting to hit. He's a multi-position guy, second and short. If they're the ones that win the bidding war for Skubal of Detroit, they're going to have to put some of those names that we just mentioned into that package. But I will also tell you the Yankees are talking to Detroit, and the Yankees have finally decided they're going to trade Spencer Jones, big power hitter. He's from San Diego.
Yeah, Carlsbad.
Yeah, they're willing to put him in the package if they can get Skubal. Yankees pitching is terrible right now. I think the Yankees are, I want to say 6-16 in their last 22. And I think the stat I read this morning, the Yankees starting staff in that 22-game window, starting staff has an ERA of 5.20. And have had injuries. And I mean, Garrett Cole's come back, but he's not the dominant Garrett Cole yet. So the Dodgers are talking to us about Skubal. Now the Yankees have jumped into the bidding. Baltimore wants another veteran frontline guy. They're talking to Detroit. All of a sudden, Skubal becomes the top pitcher on the trade block, superseding Eovaldi from Texas and obviously Quantrill, Eflin down in Tampa. So one domino is going to fall pretty quickly, and then we'll have to see who scrambles to go get the other pitchers. You know, the Padres are trying hard, but the Padres don't have the amount of resources that the Yankees have, or obviously the depth of wealth in the system the Dodgers have.
I have always loved this time of the year.
Oh, trade deadline.
The trade deadline stuff in Major League Baseball is fantastic. And some teams, they can really jockey and put themselves in a great position. But what happened to Outman and Lux? I mean, Outman still has a future, but is Lux washed up since that
Lux
injury?
had the major knee injury, and he missed more than a year. And he just hasn't come back and been the same player. But he was a hitting machine. When he marched through the Dodgers system, he got there. Now, maybe he's out of position. Maybe he's more second baseman than he is shortstop. And, of course, they moved Mookie Betts to shortstop, and now he's had this catastrophic injury with a fractured hand, and they don't know whether he's going to be back in September yet. So, but guys get hurt, and sometimes it takes them a long time to come back. I mean, the fact that Lux has hit everywhere he's always played leads me to believe he'll hit again. He's starting to hit better after that point where he's hitting 111, first couple months of the Dodgers season.
That was a brutal knee injury, by the way. That was 2 spring trainings ago.
And it was a fluke. It was against the Padres.
Yeah.
Just spikes caught. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I saw it.
It was in between second and third, wasn't it? Yeah.
Running the bases.
Okay, let's move on. Let's go Chargers here from Matt. He says, hey, Lee, we have a top 5 quarterback, a top 5 O-line, and a top 5 pass rush group. Just watch.
Awful optimistic. It's awful early, Matt. You have a top 5 quarterback. I do agree. Top 5 offensive line has to prove itself yet. We don't know that yet. Now, they do have 3 number 1 draft picks in that O front. Holes at running back. Help wanted wide receiver. Now, granted, you've got the coach, and he's changing the culture. And we'll just have to see whether all the new parts they brought in, they got rid of 11 starters in the offseason. They do have, there's no doubt they have edge rushers. I mean, they're 4 deep at edge rushers, and they brought Perriman back in. They drafted the kid from Michigan, but they have no experience or no success at defensive tackle. They cut all their tackles. So who's going to be a tough guy up inside? And I still think there's holes in the secondary that they got to address because they ran off a whole bunch of guys in the secondary. So it's work in progress. I would think, Matt, a year from this afternoon, we're doing this podcast, unless John gets deported or arrested. A year from this afternoon, they're going to be a much better team. But they've got to go through this massive shift, seismic shift. Coordinators, playbook, culture. That does not happen overnight real quick. And they got so many holes. I mean, if you were telling me Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, I'd say, damn right, AFC championship possible team. Those guys are all gone. And they still have to prove the toughness on defense. So that's one man's opinion, but usually my one man's opinion's right on. And John Riley says,
well, what about Gus Edwards? Because he's injury prone, right?
Heavy duty coming off knee surgery. J.K. Dobbins, very vibrant guy, kind of like Eckler. He's coming off an Achilles, and he was out on the open market for a long time. The only reason he got a job here is because the general manager, Joe Hickson, came from
Baltimore. Yeah.
There you go.
But if Edwards gets hurt again, I mean, they don't really have a power running guy, do they?
Not a power guy to be in the power mode that Harbaugh wants to run the bloody football all the time. I mean, they do have Isaiah Spiller, who's a third-year guy. You see little flashes, but he's never been given much of an opportunity. If somebody gets hurt, he's going to get that opportunity. But to me, there's too many unanswered questions with the opening of the Charger camp. Veterans show up on Tuesday night. First practice is on Wednesday. So we'll be talking a lot more NFL as we march through the next couple of weeks. So, my private hope is that Justin Herbert will go 17-0 one of these years, and that Gene Spanos will go 0-17. But that's the way I feel. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
We have all these new viewers who've never heard that sales pitch.
All right. Let's squeeze in one more here. Got an Aztec comment, and this is from King Zoa. He goes, that's disrespectful at the number 8 prediction in the Mountain West. But I don't trust any of the quarterbacks personally. If they could stay big in the trenches and keep their ground game explosive, they have a chance to be in the top 5.
Clean piece of paper at San Diego State. New coach. I understand the media not knowing who Sean Lewis is. I know what that guy accomplished. What he did at Colorado before the injury set in. What he did for 2 years at Kent State, which is like being on the moon. And for him to flip that thing with as many skilled people as he did. And prior to that, what he did at Bowling Green, what he did at Syracuse with quarterbacks and receivers. This is going to be fun to watch. So I'm a Sean Lewis backer. But a lot of new pieces. I mean, I'm trying to think. My numbers are so confusing right now. I want to say they wound up with 34 transfers coming in the door. They wound up losing. There's 42 who transferred out. They got an awful lot of transfers on the offense, and that takes time. This offense is really different. It's going to be Aztec fast. I call it Air Aztec. They're going to run snaps every 8 seconds. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to run sprint draws out of it. But there's so many new components there. It's going to take time to see. I mean, and the whole offensive line's been rebuilt with guys from other places. They have more transfers on offense than they do on defense. They do have younger guys on defense that are going to start with a bunch of big body transfers. So work in progress, but I believe in that guy's playbook, and I nobody else seems to have paid very much attention. All you need to do is Google Sean Lewis, Kent State, and watch what he did formation-wise and how many plays there. He had over 6,000 yards in offense. John, you know how many snaps that is to get over 6,600 all-purpose yards running and receiving in a 12-game schedule at Kent State. And he did it back-to-back seasons with different quarterbacks.
Wow. I mean, that's like having all 500-yard games, all season long. I'm intrigued by Sean Lewis. I'm curious. I'm hopeful for the Aztecs. But the Mountain West, I think I read somewhere there's 8 new head coaches, 8 new starting quarterbacks. So it could be a wide open field.
Yeah, wide open. They have a really colorful schedule. I mean, they're playing some big-time teams here, and they get Oregon State and Washington State come here as part of this Pac-2 alignment where the Cougars and the Beavers are going to play everybody in the conference. That's how they filled their schedule when the Pac-12 fell apart. So, I mean, they're going to get Oregon State, Washington State here, which I think will be fun games to watch. But I think this is a really bright light coach. So you can go on the message boards, tell them Hacksaw believes San Diego State's going to be really good in football. All right, listen, hope you have enjoyed what